Meaning is this sense of connectedness to myself, to other people, and to the world that helps me avoid anxiety, absurdity, and alienation in a comprehensive way, so that it is obvious to me how I should move around in the world and how I belong in the world. When you ask people what really contributes to the meaning in life, it's not their possessions typically, and it's not the status that they've achieved. It's the relationships that they participate in, to themselves and to other people and to reality. How do I enhance that sense of connectedness to myself, to other people, to the world? And how do I do it appropriately? How do I properly proportion my attention and my concern, my caring and my love in the right way? That's wisdom. And typically, that requires a community to support it, to home it, to give those ecologies of practices a real chance of taking on a powerful life. We have thought of, we have thought of spirituality and rationality as antagonistic to each other. And we think that's the way it should be. And we even think that's how we have to defend religion from science or defend science from religion.
It is a tragedy.
Yes, it's a tragedy, and it's a part of the meaning crisis because we keep those things fundamentally disconnected. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from other people. We're disconnected from the world.
John Vervaeke, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me.
Jorge, it's a great pleasure to be here. We've already spoken off camera, and we've been texting on WhatsApp back and forth, and it's just great. I'm glad this relationship is taking shape, and I've been excited about this conversation.
And let's take just a moment to thank our mutual friend, the person that made this possible, Bishop Maximus.
Yeah.
Hi, Bishop. Sending
Hello,
love.
Bishop. Yeah.
Okay, so John, my goal today is to introduce the foundation of your work to the Spanish-speaking community in a little bit more than an hour. Quite a challenge, I must say. And the main focus will be what you call the meaning crisis. Now, of course, this will lead us to relevance realization, the propositional tyranny, and hopefully we'll have time to cover your conciliation between science and spirituality, which is very, very interesting to me because the basic notion is that transcendence is much more than just a psychological improvement process like Carl Jung proposed. It is one that has epistemological and ontological impact, which I very much agree with, because this inevitably leads to religio, right?
Yes, very much.
So I think that the best way to get started is to define very, very precisely what is meaning. Not easy to do, but what is your definition of meaning so we can then later go into the explanation of what is the meaning crisis?
Right. And so the meaning I'm talking about here is not what people typically mean when they say the meaning of life, as it like there's a destiny or a purpose written for you. So psychologists make a distinction between that, which requires a certain, metaphysical view, and meaning in life, which is something that we can theorize and measure experimentally and empirically. I'm agnostic about the first, but I do work on the second, so that's what I feel competent to talk about. And what is meant by meaning in life is your sense of connectedness to yourself, to other people, and to the world. And that connectedness is not just sort of an add-on to your cognition, your ability to make sense of the world. It's actually central to it. And this has to do with, well, as you said, we'd get into it, has to do with relevance realization. It has to do with the fact that this kind of connectedness is central to you being a cognitive agent, the kind of being that can solve problems, pursue long-term goals, etc., in a very comprehensive manner. You're a very comprehensive problem solver. You can solve many problems in many domains, and you can solve it over many periods of time, many time scales. It makes you very, very sophisticated. It's what makes you intelligent. And within that is you have the capacity to do that very adaptively or very maladaptively. And if I could zero in on a little bit, let's try and think about what this connectedness means right here, right now. And I'll try and give an example right here, right now, and then try and get it a little bit more into the theory. Is that okay? Will that work for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so right now you are paying attention to me, I hope. And you say, well, that's obvious that Orge should pay attention to you, John. But that's the point, right? Intelligence is how to make things the best course of action obvious. And the problem is obviousness is not a physical or a chemical property, right? So we can ask ourselves this question: what does your brain have to do in order to make it obvious where you should pay attention? And you say, well, why is that an issue? Well, the issue is the amount of information actually available, the amount of things you could be paying attention to right now is uncountably large. You could be paying attention to me. You could be paying attention to your shoulder. Maybe there's a pain there. You could be paying attention to a memory you had, you're having right now. You could be paying attention to the books behind me. You could be paying attention to the figure of soccer. Like, as soon as you start to think about it, you realize, right, the amount of information you can pay attention to is overwhelming. So here's a task you face. It's like you should zero in on the relevant information, the information that is most helpful for you to solve whatever goal you're trying to solve right now. And the problem with that is, this is what you can't do. You can't check all the information to see if it's relevant or not. I can't go, I'm going to pay attention to Socrates for a second and see if that's relevant. Oh, that book. Nope, that book. If I tried to do that, it would take me an overwhelming amount of time. I would actually commit a kind of cognitive suicide. So this is the interesting thing. Your brain has to somehow ignore overwhelmingly most of the information, zero in on the relevant information. Now, that's a very risky thing to do, because when you're ignoring information, it may actually hold opportunity and risk that you're ignoring. And this is how we can deceive ourselves. We pay attention to the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so what that means for you, though, is you're not just doing some cold calculation. You're, in a very risky fashion, you're committing your very precious cognitive resources, which are limited, the amount of time you have, which is limited, to this piece of information rather than that information. And in a very profound sense, and I mean this, you're caring about some information and not caring about other information. You're binding yourself to it. You're committing yourself to it. You're connecting yourself to it. Now, when that works, such that you're able to adaptively anticipate the environment and zero in on the relevant information and satisfy your goals, right? That is the sort of that connection is being confirmed. It's being verified for you. You're getting a sort of an affective reward for it. That's that sense of connectedness. I'm connected. So when you're getting me, when you're focusing your vision on me in the right way, and you're hearing on me in the right way. So you're not just seeing, right? You're actually, viewing and watching, right? And you're not just hearing, you're listening, and you're coordinating all this together, and you're getting it. It's helping you to make connections, right, to your long-term memory, things you already know, helping you to form questions you want to make. That's that sense of connectedness. Now, the opposite, right, is if that's lacking. You frame the world in a certain way, and you're not getting the right feedback. You're feeling disconnected. You can't make it work. Well, that's anxiety. Or you may be shifting between different perspectives. You may say, well, it sort of works from this perspective, but from a much larger perspective, it's not working. It's incoherent. And that's when you sense it's absurd. Or you could be that you and I are doing this and you're just not connecting to me and you don't really care, right? And I'm going to feel, and maybe you're reciprocating, I'm going to feel alienated from you. So now I can answer your question. Meaning is this sense of connectedness to myself, to other people, and to the world that helps me avoid anxiety, absurdity, and alienation in a comprehensive way so that it is obvious to me how I should move around in the world and how I belong in the world. How is that for an initial attempt?
Yeah, I think that the main idea, if I get it, is that there are certain things in the environment that are salient to you, that, and then you realize they are more relevant than the others. But the mechanism that drives your attention and perception to focus on one and discard the other is not materialistic. It's
No.
something more like a metaphysical structure, implicit, something that you cannot touch, that you cannot calculate. It's not a cold calculation, like you said, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, relevance isn't a property of, like, I'm holding up my my water container here, right? It's not a property of a thing, but it's also not. It's not a purely subjective thing on like whether or not you like vanilla.
It's more like a relationship between the two.
Yes,
right?
that's why I keep using this sense of you're helping me to make the point, which I'm thankful for, right? You have to think of it as a fittedness of the two belonging together, of them being right. The world and you co-create this real connectedness that allows you to be an effective agent in the world and actually turns the world into something. And my colleagues and I, Christopher Mastropietro and Philip Mizovic, we talked about it like the world becomes an arena. It makes sense to you as to what kind of things you should pay attention to, what kinds of actions. Now, if you pay attention to your attention, you can actually see a little bit about how the relevance realization machinery is working. So as you're paying attention to me, there's a part of you that's trying to keep focused on me. That's called the task focus network. And whether there's one or many is a dispute, and we don't need to talk about that, right? But there's another part of you that, and we're doing it naturally, so I'm not criticizing it. There's mind wandering. Your mind wants to drift away. Oh, this is hard, or I don't really care about this too much. Your mind starts to drift away, right? And that's the default mode network. And why is that? Why are you doing that? Because you spend a lot of time in mind wandering. And most people, why does my mind wander so much? Well, here's the idea. When your mind wanders, you introduce new things you could potentially pay attention to. And that's why mind wandering is all about stuff that's intrinsically relevant to you. When you mind wander, you picture situations that you're sort of intrinsically interested in. And then what you do is you sort of see, are any of those variations useful for right here? And so you've got this one system that's opening up the possibilities, and then another system, the task focus. So default is opening up the variation. Task focus is selecting. And you sometimes bring in some of what was in that mind wandering. It turns out to make a difference. And so you're constantly doing variation and selection, variation and selection. And what that means, that's the mechanism of evolution, variation with selection, and it constantly gets reproduced in what you're paying attention to. So you're constantly evolving that connectedness to the situation. And so it's very analogous to how animals are evolved to be biologically fitted to their environment. It's just your brain can do it extremely fast. And that sense of fittedness really matters to you. And you say, well, this is all very intellectual. Well, it's not just at that propositional level. That sense of fittedness, you can feel it at the level of your identity and your sense of belonging. Do I belong here? Like, what's going on there? And it really matters to you. It really matters to you when you sense like, I don't belong here. And that can be, I can feel lonely, I can feel homesick, I could be having culture shock, or I've come into a situation and I don't quite get. I can't quite connect to it. So this is just a pervasive thing in you, moment by moment. But it's also something that you're caring about in a very long-term manner, because when you ask people what really contributes to the meaning in life, it's not their possessions typically. And it's not the status that they've achieved. It's the relationships that they participate in to themselves and to other people and to reality.
It's more like a participatory level of reality, which we have forgotten. And you talk extensively about
Yeah.
it. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you talk that the dynamic complexity of our thought processes is something that we don't really understand. But traditionally, religions were kind of proposing that we are animated by mysterious forces, right?
Yes.
That go way far beyond materialism, right? And they try to organize all this chaos and mess in all the multiple layers of the individual psyche in a
Yes.
coherent way, right? In a harmonious integration, right, into the social fabric as well. And we have forgotten all of this because now we are living in this kind of you call it the propositional tyranny, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I talk about, based on the work I do in cognitive science, I talk about 4 kinds of knowing. And the one that is predominant and almost exclusively identified with knowing is propositional knowing. And I want to make it clear from the very beginning, because people have misattributed to me. I think propositional knowing is important. I'm a scientist. I build theories. That's propositional knowing. It's important. But let's be clear about what it is, and then clear about why it shouldn't be taken as exclusive. Propositional knowing is knowing that something is the case, knowing that cats are mammals, and I have beliefs about it, and I want, in order for those beliefs to connect me to reality, I need those beliefs to be true. And so I have a sense of conviction about the truth. And that's stored in a particular kind of memory called semantic memory. Like, for example, if I ask you, Jorge, do you know that cats are mammals? You'll say yes.
Yeah.
And I'll say, do you remember the event where you learned that? Probably not.
No,
Right?
not
Yeah,
really.
yeah, ththat's right. So and these are these weird things we call facts. We have knowledge of facts, and it's actually a very tricky thing to figure out what a fact is. Don't give me an example of fact. Tell me what a fact is. But we'll put that aside. Now, that's different from and dependent on your knowing how to do things. You know, like you're knowing how to ride a bicycle, how to kiss someone you love, how close to stand to somebody when you're just meeting them. Your know-how is huge, and know-how isn't about beliefs, it's about skills. When I know how to do something well, I haven't got a belief, I've got a skill. And a skill is stored in procedural memory. It's a different kind of memory. In fact, you can impair semantic memory without impairing procedural memory, and vice versa. They're that different from each other. And its sense of realness isn't truth. Do you know how to swim?
I do.
Right. Is your skill of swimming true or false right now?
It's complicated to answer that question, right?
Well, I think it's not even. I think it's not complicated. I think it's a bad question because it doesn't make any sense. Right. Yeah, because skills aren't true or false. They apply or they don't.
Yeah.
Right. And so the sense of realness we have for them is power. When I have a skill, it empowers me in the environment, and I know I'm using my Tai Chi skills right when I'm winning in sparring. I've got a power over the situation. Now that, right, your skill knowledge, knowing how, depends on knowing where, when, and which skills you should activate and apply. So, well, what is that? Well, that's your situational awareness. That's your sense of how you're present. This is your sense of what's here now, what your state of mind is, and what the situation is, how you're showing up. And we often use a metaphor for that. We say, I have a particular perspective on this situation. This is your perspectival knowing. It's knowing what it's like to be you here now in your state of mind in the situation in which you are situated. And it has its own kind of memory. It's called episodic memory. So you couldn't answer me about where you learned that cats are mammals, but I might ask you, do you remember what you had for breakfast this morning?
Yeah, I remember.
And what you do is you call up a little scene and how you were situated.
Yeah, I can picture it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what I call your salience landscaping. You're doing it right now. Everybody's doing it. What is being foregrounded in your experience? What is being backgrounded? Right? How are you sort of putting it together? What problems are you seeing that need to be addressed in the situation? Right? And that's your salience landscaping. And that's what your perspectival knowing is doing. Perspectival knowing works primarily in terms of how you know by noticing. What are you noticing right now? That's your perspectival. Oh, I'm noticing that. Right. And that's the perspectival knowing. And it works in an episodic memory. It gives you perspectives. And its sense of realness is what I mentioned earlier. It's your sense of, I'm present, I'm here, I'm really in this situation. Now that depends, that perspectival knowing what it's like to be you, depends on the deepest kind of knowing, the knowing that is you, which is your participatory knowing. This is the knowing that you do by being the kind of being you are. And what I mean by that is the way your body and your mind and your character have been shaped. And what we have to understand is they have never been shaped in isolation. You're always, whatever identity you're assuming, whatever agency you're assuming, you're also assigning an arena that it belongs to. So you're taking on an identity right now. You're the podcaster, and you're assigning a certain identity to me. You wouldn't take that identity into how you interact with your kids. That would be weird, because that doesn't fit well. I mean, you need to be like a father. You need to take on that identity, that role, and you need to see them as your children, not as strangers, for example. So there are ways in which physics and culture and biology have co-shaped you in the environment. You shape your environment, the environment shapes you, so you fit together, you belong together. This is called an affordance. So here's my water bottle again. Culture and technology have shaped me and shaped this thing so it fits my hand and I know how to use it. So I have a particular cultural identity that fix onto the cultural identity of this, so it affords me carrying liquids around. And this floor is walkable, right? And so what your participatory knowing is knowing by being the self you are, by being the agent you are, by the roles you assume and the roles you assign, and the way affordances are generated. Now, I can answer the question I asked way earlier. What is it for something to be obvious? So your participatory knowing, the affordances that are opening up between who you are and what the environment is and how they're shaping each other, often unconsciously. There's affordances. When an affordance is drawn into my perspectival knowing and becomes salient to me, it becomes obvious to me if that salience landscaping tells me which skills I need to activate. And once I activate those skills, I know which relevant beliefs and facts to bring to bear. And when all of that goes like that, boom, then it's obvious what I should be doing.
So, quick recap, John.
Yeah.
We have basically different levels of being. Right? We have different ways of knowing reality and relate to what's going on. We have a propositional level, which is labeling reality in categories. Like you said, cats are mammals. And this results in beliefs of true and false, right? Then we have procedural, which is how to do things, how to kiss, how to swim. Then we have perspectival, which is a state of mind, a realness in presence, I heard you say before, right?
Yes.
And finally, we have the participatory, which is knowing by being.
Yes.
All these levels need to work together in order for us to find meaning, right? The kind of meaning that you are talking about.
Yes.
And what we were saying before when we use this term or this concept of the propositional tyranny is that right now human beings are kind of obsessed with this propositional knowledge or knowing, and we are forgetting everything else. We are discarding it. This is not relevant. This is not important. And well, if that's not relevant, then we are also losing a sense of what's really relevant, because everything is working together in different levels. And then this is leading right into this meaning crisis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was very well said. When we say that the only kind of knowing, or the only kind of knowing that matters, which of course, as you said, is a relevance judgment, is propositional, then we lose touch with it. It's still acting. I mean, you couldn't move around the world if you didn't have procedural and perspectival and participatory knowing, but it's still acting. But we are actually, it's acting in a way we don't acknowledge and we don't properly appreciate in all senses. Be grateful for, understand, and value, right? And so that leads to the result that most of the machinery of the sense of connectedness is being ignored, denigrated. And that means that people are trying to get everything from their beliefs that beliefs can't carry. And this is, of course, why our world is now getting increasingly beset by ideological tyranny, in which these sets of beliefs, everybody has to hold these sets of beliefs, right?
I am right, you are wrong, and that's it, right? There are no other levels of reality.
Right. And so all we care about is what people believe. And what's problematic about that is, first of all, we, like as we've already said, we lose a lot of the connection to the connectedness machinery. There's a kind of weird irony there. We become disconnected from the very machinery of connectedness. And the other is, as I mentioned earlier, the very processes that are allowing you, right, to get connected, these relevance realization processes, these framing processes. Remember, I said you're always taking a risk, that the needed information is actually outside your salience landscaping. What that means is that we are constantly prone to self-deception. We find the wrong stuff salient. Instead of this being abstract, let it make it concrete. So you want, and we'll do it at the propositional level, since people are so familiar with it, but you'll see how something below the propositional is at work. So you want to know if one of your beliefs is true. So you're going to gather evidence for it. And what evidence stands out for you? What evidence grabs your attention? What evidence is salient to you? Well, the evidence that confirms your belief. And what evidence are you basically ignoring and not seeking and not looking for? The evidence that could challenge your belief, right? This is the confirmation bias. And we all fall prey to it. And then when we put it into social media, it gets accelerated, and we get echo chambers and bubbles, and we get all the viciousness, because what we're doing is basically a kind of confirmation pornography, where we're just reinforcing each other's confirmation bias. And it gets harder and harder for us to look for the evidence that could actually call our belief into question.
The famous echo chambers, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's what happens. And that's just one example amongst many. So the very processes that make you adaptive, that framing process, makes you always susceptible to self-deception. So if you're stuck in propositional tyranny, notice at the level of the propositions, I can't really get at what's driving the confirmation bias. I need to get down to the perspectival. And right, why is my salience that? And this is ultimately going to be bound up with your participatory knowing. My identity. I'm going to choose the things that, confirm my identity and keep my and you do all of this stuff below the propositional is at work. So two things is what I'm pointing. When we're in propositional tyranny, we get cut off from most of the machinery that is giving us the connectedness, and we become ignorant of a lot of the machinery that is driving our self-deception. And that self-deception further cuts us off from ourself. Think about what echo chambering does. It cuts you off from a lot of other people. It actually cuts you off from yourself, because you won't listen to certain parts of you that are trying to tell you that maybe you're being narrow-minded. And it cuts you off from reality in a fundamental way as you get sort of, entombed within your echo chamber.
So,
and so
if we use a different language, more like a religious Christian language, not with the intention of imposing any belief, but just trying to seeing things from a different perspective, this would be very much like a satanic mechanism, because it deceives you constantly and it disconnects you from others. So basically, that's the role of Satan in the scripture.
Yeah, I mean, we used Leo Ferraro and I, we used a biological metaphor that I think would overlap with that. We talked about parasitic processing. We talked about how a lot of these, right, these adaptive mechanisms that can also mislead you and cause you to misframe, they can all start reinforcing each other in a very complex way within you and without you, and like a parasite, take you over and drain life from you.
It's a form of possession framed from a biological perspective, but it's equivalent, right, to many of the mystic language that other religions, especially Christianism in this case, have been using.
I think that's right. I think that Um, the mythical language, and for me, mythos is not an insult word. The mythological language was a way of trying to articulate, the experience that people were having. But this leads us, I think, to the core issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Across cultures, across historical periods, right? And as you say, often, and I'll explain why in a minute, within a religious framework, people have looked for not just beliefs, not just doctrines. They've looked for virtues and practices and ways of transforming identity and undergoing self-transcendence that will help them ameliorate that self-deception and enhance that connectedness to themselves, to each other, and to the world. And when they found ecologies of practices, sets of things they could do that formed a living system that could counteract that sort of parasite, they've typically given that the word wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so another way of thinking about the meaning crisis, now that we've built some of this work together, is the meaning crisis is really a wisdom famine. And by wisdom, I don't mean anything esoteric or arcane or the secret knowledge possessed by this. I mean this very real process of how do I overcome foolishness, self-deceptive, self-destructive behavior? How do I enhance that sense of connectedness? And I use the word religio because that's what religio means. How do I enhance that sense of connectedness to myself, to other people, to the world? And how do I do it appropriately? How do I properly proportion my attention and my concern, my caring and my love in the right way? That's wisdom. And typically, that requires a community to support it, to home it, to give those ecologies of practices a real chance of taking on a powerful life. Look, because if you do this autodidactically by yourself, there's a good chance you'll actually fall prey to all of those biases without realizing it. But if you do it with a bunch of other people and they're all acting as checks and balances on each other, that's why I use the metaphor of an ecology, then you have a very good chance of a wisdom tradition building within a community and across generations. And I think one of the important things religions do is they create a worldview that provides a traditional home for the cultivation of wisdom in the way I have explained.
Yeah, I heard you before, John, when you said it's very, very interesting coming from a explicitly non-religious person, right?
Yeah.
We need what religions used to do for us. And the way that I see it, I think we talk about this off camera in another time, is like this meaning crisis is leading to nihilism, right?
Yes.
But to me, nihilism is not nothing matters. The way that I am starting to see nihilism interacting with many people is, since I don't know how to reach heaven, or I don't want to do what's necessary to reach heaven, you can call it wisdom. Well, I will reach hell because I know perfectly how to get there, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's a sense in which as your experience is overtaken by absurdity and alienation and anxiety and futility and frustration, you will seek the only non-questionable connectedness you have. Eric Fromm made this point.
Mm-hmm.
And typically that's violence. That's destructiveness of some kind. Now, I don't necessarily mean physical violence. It can be verbal violence. It can be emotional violence.
Yeah, destroy the culture, right?
Yeah,
Chaos.
right, yes, exactly. Because at least the idea is so if you think about, and we can get back to this at another point, if you think about knowing as a way of coming into contact, that connectedness, being in contact with reality, and it shaping you and you shaping it, so that you conform together. This is, of course, a Platonic idea. If the world is absurd, and you feel alienated and you feel anxious, the one way you can still conform to reality is by yourself being chaotic and violent in very powerful ways. Because then you can say, at least I'm still in touch with reality, because this is how reality really is. If reality is dark and chaotic, the way I can still be connected to it, at least minimally, is to be dark and chaotic myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a nostalgia for paradise, Mircea Eliade said, right? It's like all the nonsense, the generation, all the disconnection, chaos we see around is kind of like our secret way to beg God to take us back to paradise.
That's an
But
interesting
since we
point.
don't know how to get there, well, we go to the other side. What you said, all the violence, all the chaos, and actually, we can think about paradise like the propositional period, in a way.
Oh yes, yes. Yeah. I think Jonathan Pajot has suggested something similar to me.
Hmm.
That
Exactly. Yeah.
the myth of the garden is the myth
Hmm.
of um, uh, what it was like before propositional tyranny.
And we all keep like a symbolic memory of it. It's in us.
So I guess one thing I would want to say, I don't know, I'm not really pushing back, but I'm making space. I want to say that there are yes, there are definitely people who sort of drive towards hell and nihilism, but I also want to say that there are people who suffer from the meaning crisis. They're not driving to hell. They don't want to be in this, what they're in, and they're trying various alternative ways of getting out of it. And so they're not sort of embracing nihilism. They're feeling overshadowed by it, and they're trying to find the light in some fashion. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on around that. And so, Christopher Mastropietro and I, we talked about different symptoms. I don't want to say that the people who, are suffering tremendous, anxiety and depression, are just, sort of pursuing hell. They're also suffering under the meaning crisis. They're suffering under a lack of connectedness, and their culture is not really able to help them right. Or people who understand. Let's say at the other end of the continuum, understand that there's a lack of the cultivation of wisdom in their life, and so they're taking up mindfulness practices, or they're bringing back stoicism, or many of them, returning to a religion they thought they no longer needed, etc. The largest demographic group I'm trying to address, and it's one of the fastest growing demographic groups in North America, it will overtake people who have a religious commitment very soon, are the nuns, the NONESs. And what this is these are people in the surveys, when you survey them, they put down as that they have no religious affiliation or identity. That's why they're called the nuns. Now, they don't typically identify as nihilistic or even as materialistic. They typically use this phrase that is pervasive and vague beyond vague beyond the pale. They say that they're spiritual but not religious, which is a very so for me that is one of the greatest symptoms. As you said, I'm not here advocating for religion. No, neither am I religion allergic. So what's interesting me there is there seems to be a tension. They're trying to say, well, I need a set of practices, I need rituals, and we can talk about why ritual is so important, because I really think it is. But I don't want to belong to an institution. And there are sort of sets of reasons. One is they're upset by sort of the history of that particular institution. And I'm not picking on any church, temple, or synagogue, because this varies. Other concerns are they feel that the language of that institution is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't fit in the modern sort of scientific, technological world. And then a final reason is they have been given sort of the idea that their own individual satisfaction is something they should give a priority to in their lives. And this is, of course, even if they don't explicitly believe that at an ethical level, and I'm not saying they do, but at an often unconscious level, they are being given all kinds of messaging, especially in North America and Europe, that, you finding your own sense of well-being and happiness, that's it. That's what you're here to do, and that's what you're here for. And of course, this can show up. I'm not saying all these people are this, but one of the things that can drive is, the sort of narcissism epidemic that's also growing in North America and Europe. The increasing number of times we're seeing that people are sort of pathologically narcissistic in dangerous fashion. So I'm trying to gather that all together. I'm trying to understand this group, and I'm trying to understand how could I best help them.
I see. So actually, this group, what they are looking for is what we kind of introduced in the beginning of this conversation, which is transcendence, right?
Yeah.
It's a deeper process than just psychological improvement. It's
Yes.
something that goes way beyond. And narcissism kills transcendence
Oh,
because
yes.
you have to go beyond yourself if you want to
Yes.
find transcendence. And narcissism is the domain of me, right?
Yes. Yes. And narcissism is that your salience landscaping has been so twisted that you're falling into a kind of perpetual self-deception, because what like yourself should be salient to you, or else you're going to bump into stuff, right? You're not going to feed yourself and all kinds of stuff, right? But you can get to a place and a lot of it's because of psychological trauma and other stuff. I'm not trying to be mean here, but you can get it that the self becomes super salient. We already are egocentric to begin with, right? Our own position is salient to us and super salient. And it's a lot of maturing is overcoming egocentrism at various levels of abstraction. Like the little kid has to first realize, right, there's other people besides them, and you have to work that up. But the narcissist, they're entrapped. They're hungering for a connectedness, and they have swallowed the idea that the self is the locus of connectedness, and that everything should then be connected to the self. All attention, right? The hallmark of a narcissist is they want unearned attention. They want unearned attention. They think just by being who they are, they should be given all the attention. And that shows you how much the non-propositional mechanisms, the non-propositional processes, the processes like attention and salience landscape are getting out of whack for a large number of people. And part of what's wrong, as you said, with a lot of the nuns and the spiritual but not religious, is this gets very often wrapped up in a quest for self-transcendence that gets perverted in a narcissistic fashion into, here are the wonderful experiences I have, and please pay attention to how unique and important and special I am. And so you get what Trungpa called spiritual materialism, in which you're pursuing what looks like self-transcendence, but you're actually pursuing self-aggrandizement. And think about how similar those are in a superficial way. In self-aggrandizement, the self feels like it's getting larger and bigger and is more important, right? And that could feel like somebody who's has not been given the proper education. Well, that must be what self-transcendence is, that sense of the self getting bigger and more connected.
Yeah, and I have to say, John, that what I've been observing just by consuming your content and following you is that you've been very careful in not to fall under this category of look at me, because since many people are looking at you, and that's it, right? Is that they want to see you, but you don't want to be seen that way, right?
No, I thank you for saying that, and I'll take it as encouragement from a friend. I aspire to be a follower of Socrates, and yeah, for me, what matters is the love of wisdom, following the logos where it goes, being humble about what I do and don't know, acknowledging that most of what I come to is done with, through, and by means of other people, and then properly trying to attune to that and properly proportion my attention and care that way. Yeah, it is very it's very tempting. I'll use a biblical word. It's very tempting. The increase in notoriety, the increase in income, potentially fame and wealth, to be drawn into this and to get lost in it in a very corrupting fashion. I'm not claiming to be incorruptible. That's ridiculous. I'm all I can honestly say is I practice and work hard and aspire to being that way and I try to engage everyone who cares about me and wants to care about me to help me be that way and live that way. I've said, I only want to be sort of, let's do something concrete. My YouTube channel, I only want it to be large enough that people take me seriously, but not so large that they would be tempted to idolize me, or I would be tempted to think of myself as anything but a humble aspirant of the Socratic path. And so the other thing is I've, with the help of some really, really wonderful people like Ryan Barton and Eric Foster, or Christopher Master Pietro, Taylor Barrett, Robert Gray, set up the Vervaeke Foundation. So the money and the managing of the media is in the hands of the Vervaeke Foundation, and I have an arm's length relationship to it. And the express mandate of the Vervaeke Foundation is to get to a place where it would become obsolete. It would have built a community that becomes self-sustaining and no longer needs it. And my hope has been that by keeping sort of some distance between the money, the power, and some of the influence, that will give me and that is buffered by really competent people who I've placed my trust in, because I've come to the conclusion that they're coming at this in very good faith, and they want this to be virtuous. We're all committed to that. My hope is by having that space and having it buffered by people other than myself that are coming to it in good faith and with a genuine commitment to undertaking all of this virtuously, that we can avoid, right, falling into these traps of misconstruing self-aggrandizement as self-transcendence.
John, I have to say, and I don't say this lightly, I am really, really humbled by your intellectual and moral honesty, really. And that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy consuming your content and learning from you, learning a lot from you. Actually, one of the things that I really want to talk about, even though you know that I'm Catholic, well, that's not kind of like, I hope, an impediment to our relationship and our friendship.
No,
But
not
I
by any
think
means.
there are many, 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 many things that you propose that are not specifically religious, but are really helpful to society today. And one of them is this notion of extended naturalism, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So, do you want to go a little bit deep into this?
Yeah,
Because I know this is not easy for many people, right?
yeah, yeah.
But I think that also these kind of mysterious, complex topics draw the attention of many other people as well. So let's go.
So you've been very good up to now, and I've really appreciated it. I will tend to drift into too much abstraction. I'm a scientist by trade, and I'm a philosopher by vocation and training. Yeah, I'm going to depend on you to help me out about this.
Yeah. So I think that the starting point, the most interesting starting point for me, is this kind of reductionism, you say, is a flat ontology, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there is this idea of levels of ontology, and they say that this is ultimately illusory, right? Because only the bottom level, right, is the real level.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what's
And
this all about?
so this is an interpretation of naturalism as leading to. So naturalism is that your ontology. That's exactly what's in question. Naturalism is an ontology that gives priority to the natural sciences for deciding what is real. But there's two ways you can give priority. One is you can say, I will only let be real what is derivable from my natural sciences. So, right, you talk about love. Well, love doesn't really fit into the natural sciences, but I know brain chemistry fits in, and I can explain your behavior in terms of the brain. So love is nothing but brain chemistry. That nothing but is that flattening you were talking about. You're saying that all that stuff up there, that's an illusion. It's not real. What's real, what's really going on, right, is the brain chemistry. Now, the reason why that strikes people as the way to go is because that is in many areas, and we have to be fair here. We have to be honest, like you said, right? That has been a successful strategy.
Yes.
Let me give you one example. Lightning is nothing but electricity. There's nothing to lightning other than electricity. If you understand electricity, you understand lightning. Now, and here's the point. But if I understand electricity, I can not only can I explain lightning, I can explain the spark that comes out of my finger when I walk on carpet with wool socks. I can explain if I rub a balloon on my hair, why it will stick to the wall. Like once I get electricity, I can explain a lot of things, not just lightning. And so I think of electricity as more real. That's the reductive strategy. The reductive strategy says, look, right? All that is real is what is derivable from our natural sciences, and what we're doing is we're looking for the most real properties are the properties that are shared by as many things as possible. So when I get electricity, I can talk about lightning, sparks, why balloons stick to the wall, all kinds of stuff, right? And then if I can branch it out to electromagnetism, then I can talk about light and magnets, and so I keep looking for the properties that will generalize. What that means is that will explain more and more kinds of things. And this has been tremendously successful in science. Now, there's two problems with that, right? So I want to be clear that the reductive strategy is people pursue it because they are rightly impressed by how powerful it has been in science and in technology. You and I are talking, right? Because people figured out electricity and electromagnetism, right? So we have to acknowledge that. But the fact that it's been powerful doesn't mean that it is comprehensively right.
And doesn't only mean that is the only thing that is real, because the basic
exactly.
premise is that what makes things real is their materiality. And what you say is like very important, the materiality, but it's not the only thing that is real, because we have, for example, information, right? Which is...
Well, yeah, exactly.
Let's get into this.
Yeah, so let's note two things. First of all, naturalism should not only be committed to what you can infer from the natural sciences. It has to also, if it wants to be rationally consistent and coherent, it has to also extend to what is presupposed by the natural sciences. And that's a different thing. This is not something the natural sciences can, right, generate as knowledge, because they have to fundamentally presuppose it in order for them to make their knowledge claims. And here's a presupposition. The natural sciences are real. There really are scientists, and they really are making measurements, and those measurements are really true, and et cetera, et cetera. And you say, well, so what? Well, notice that that's something I can't establish by science, because it's something I have to presuppose in order to do science. I have to presuppose that I can make measurements. I have to presuppose that I can make statements that are true and false, et cetera, et cetera.
The intelligibility of the universe, I presuppose that.
Yes.
And I also presuppose that I am able to interact with that and understand
that intelligible. Right? Yes, exactly. And Nicholas Maxwell made this argument quite a while ago about, that's something you can't establish with your science. It's something you have to assume or presuppose.
Or to have faith in.
Yes, I think in one understanding of faith, yes, I think that's correct. I don't think it's not faith in the sense of asserting beliefs without evidence, but in the sense of how, but this goes to what I'm saying.
In certain ways, I'm not trying to challenge anyone, but in certain ways, I believe that some scientific endeavors presuppose that science is going to be able to find answers to things they haven't answered. So that's faith in a way, right?
That's a faith, because this is sort of Plantinga's notion of faith, that faith is not wild assertion. Faith is your indispensable presuppositions for any project that you are considering a rational project. So if science is a rational project, which I think that's how it understands itself, and it's supposed to be an epitome of a rational project, then I have to say, what do I indispensably have to presuppose in order to do that rational project? And therefore, although I can't give you an argument for it, it is rational to hold those presuppositions because they're indispensable to doing the science. Now, given all that said, that's extended naturalism. That's the idea that what's real isn't just what I can infer from the natural sciences, but what I have to presuppose. And we've given a bunch. The intelligibility of the universe, that we are the kind of cognitive agents that can pick up on that intelligibility, that we really exist, that we can make theories, that we can make measurements. And then what you can see is that's very problematic if you have a flat reductionist ontology. And I gave a lot of arguments in a talk, and I won't try and repeat all those but the point is they're all convergent, so they make the conclusion very quite powerfully plausible. The problem is, first of all, you can't stop reduction anywhere but at the very bottom. So if somebody says to you, love is just brain chemistry, but you say, but brain chemistry, that's just an atomic phenomena. And atomic phenomena, those are just quarks. And quarks are just Higgs boson. And then Higgs boson is just space-time. And then space-time are just emergent. And you have to go down to this very bottom level that is very, very far away from anything like what most people understand by materialism. Now, why am I being... Well, first of all, why am I saying that? Because you have no principal reason of stopping. If your reason is the lower level is better than the level above because it explained more, I have to keep dropping because that's going to continue to be true.
And what is the lowest?
Right is the absolute
Where is that?
lowest. Well, that's the thing. You get into this very problematic about what is the lowest, and is the lowest even properly knowable? So let's put a pin in that, because that's problematic. But let's come back to this. If everything above it is an illusion, everything above that, let's say like that quantum flux or the probability waves is an illusion, then the scientists and the measurements they're making and the machines they're using to make the measurements and the mathematical calculation and the computers and all the conferences and the arguments and the debates and the discussion, which are way up here, they're all illusions. And if they're illusions, how could they possibly give me real knowledge about what's at the bottom?
Yeah, very, very interesting. So what they are saying is we are all living in an illusion, but this illusion can point us to what's real.
Yes,
that's kind of contradictory, right?
Yeah, it's a performative contradiction. It's and the other thing that you get in there, which is very problematic, is where's the illusion? Like where does it? Like I literally mean, where is it ontologically? Where is it in reality? Well, it's in people's minds. But you've told me that minds are only an illusion. So you're actually saying it's an illusion that I claim that there's an illusion, and it just keeps destroying.
It's the illusion loop, right?
Yes,
the infinite illusion loop.
Yes, and like I say, I'm asking for some indulgence from your listeners. There's a lot more, and you've listened to the talk, Jorge. You know, there's a lot. I bring a whole bunch of arguments from a whole bunch of people to converge on this. And so the idea is that, no, we need reality to be properly leveled. And we need it to be leveled, and we need it to have an intelligibility that we can be in touch with at these various levels. And that is very much the Neoplatonic framework of reality and knowing. And then what that tells you is knowing is not just gaining information. Knowing is a way of transforming yourself so that you could conform into a higher or lower level of reality. And that means that self-transcendence is not just improving your psychological well-being. If I engage in the proper self-transcendence, and this is the Neoplatonic claim, I can move to a level of knowing that puts me in conformity to a higher level of reality, such that I am in touch with it, such that I am religio to it. And that is real transcendence. That's transcendence. Here's another way of putting it. There are some truths that will only be disclosed to me when I undergo transformation, when I undergo self-transcendence. This is very much the notion up till the scientific age, up to people like Descartes and Leibniz. They gave us the notion of, no, as long as I have one method, and this one method, the scientific method, will give me access to all truths. The counter argument I'm now giving you is no. And by the way, the idea that there can be one method has been undermined by so many things, right? You know, and that was part of my talk too. Most of the distinctions that made that sort of a plausible thing have broken down. But what I'm saying is, no. The old model The Neoplatonic model is, no, I have to transcend, I have to transform in order for certain truths to be disclosed to me. First of all, that's epistemologically. I can't know it until I've transformed. And the kind of reality I come in contact with is different in kind. It's at a different level than the reality I was in contact with before I underwent the transformation. So that is a form of transcendence that has epistemological, new kinds of knowledge, and ontological, new ways of being, new aspects of being disclosed to me in it. That's real self-transcendence.
So this leads to this very, very, very interesting framework that you have of the emergence emanation. Right?
Yes.
It's like, so all this transcendence is something that we can only attain if we allow ourselves to be in touch or connected in this religious sense with what emerges as well as what emanates.
Yes.
So what comes from below and what comes from above, which is a very, very also symbolic idea.
Yes.
In the Old Testament, in Genesis, it is said that Adam, which is at the same time a human being and a symbol of
Earth.
all humanity,
His name
it's
means
a
earth.
symbol that connects matter, fact,
Yes.
with meaning.
Yes.
So is you elevate matter and you take down the meaning from above, and then you are acting as a bridge. This is very, very similar, right? But in a more like, well, like you said, extended naturalism.
Yeah, it's a way that it's a notion of self-transcendent that is conciliant with naturalism. I'm not saying anything that requires me to trespass against the rationality of the sciences, as long as rational means not only what is inferred by, but also what is presupposed by the practice and the existence of the sciences. So yes, I think that's important. You see, we have tended, and we think this is even part and parcel of religious framework. Post the Reformation and the Enlightenment, we have thought of, we have thought of spirituality and rationality as antagonistic to each other. And we think that's the way it should be. And we even think that's how we have to defend religion from science or defend science from religion.
It is a tragedy.
Yes, it's a tragedy, and it's a part of the meaning crisis because we keep those things fundamentally disconnected. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from other people. We're disconnected from the world, right? But it's a tragedy because if you go back, and I'm not saying we can go back, and at some time we'll talk about what does it mean why we can't go back. But if we can recover and well, I'll use a religious term, and I don't mean it to be insulting. I mean it to be helpful. So please, I'm not being irreligious. If we can resurrect it, bring it back, but bring it back in a new life, right? This framework, what that framework did, that older framework, is it said, no, your rationality and your spirituality are completely interwoven with each other in a profound way. They're not orthogonal or even antagonistic. They are deeply interpenetrating and mutually supporting. This is the Neoplatonic framework. And so you can, and what's odd about our current scientific worldview is it's just inverted Neoplatonism. So ancient Neoplatonism said the most real was on top, right? So let me be careful. The most ancient Neoplatonism said the most real is on top, and then reality sort of emanates down, and the least real is at the very bottom. And now what we have is a scientific framework that complains I've rejected all, but it's exactly the same framework, just inverted, right? Now the most real is at the very, very bottom, and as you go up, things become less and less real. They're completely symmetrical to each other, and so they see each other. Oh no, but you're actually the same. You're just, and now here's right. You're just saying where you start from, right? Which means any argument I can give for the bottom up, I can give a symmetrical argument for the top down, logically equivalent.
Actually, you did that beautifully with using the example of an amoeba. I remember it, right? You said that if you're a reductionist, you say the amoeba, it isn't real. No, all that's real are the quarks or something at the quantum level, but everything above that isn't real. It's just an illusion, or like they say, like an epiphenomena, right?
Yeah.
But to hang together an amoeba, to stay together, right? It needs also like higher patterns to maintain that,
Yes, yes,
right?
yeah, yes. And so let's do that. The emergence up, if you say the levels up are just epiphenomena, so for people listening, this is a sort of philosophical term for saying it is an effect, but it has no causal powers. So and then people try to use analogies like the noise coming from the car engine is the epiphenomena because it
Or
really,
the dunes in the desert. They are
yeah,
the epiphenomena of the grains of sand, they say as well,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, things like that.
Mhm.
Um, the problem is there is no, those examples don't actually work. For example, the noise coming out of a car's engine reflects its heat, and the heat is actually, having a causal effect on the metal of the engine. So the problem with the term epiphenomena is actually you can't find any examples that actually fit into the category. The analogies don't work because you use something that is properly actually not an epiphenomena. Secondly, to say that something is real but has no causal powers means it can't act, which means very technically it's not actual, and that's very problematic to say that it's real. And thirdly, if it has no effects, how could I possibly know it as it? How could I know the sand dunes as sand dunes, right, etc.? Because knowledge is an effect. I think there's no such thing as epiphenomena, to put it. There's a longer, complex argument there, but that's
I'm
it.
with you there, huh?
Right.
You're not alone.
And then to say, oh, what epiphenomena are just illusions in the mind gets us back into that other argument that
Yeah.
we sort of deconstructed. So if you have emergence up, you have causal emergence up, you also have to have top-down constraint. Let me give you a classic example from Alicia Uraro, right? So you have all the chemical interactions within a tree, and they cause the structure of the tree, right? And the tree grows the way it grows. Now, why does a tree grow the way it grows and the leaves grow the way they grow? Because that structure increases the chance that a photon will hit a chlorophyll molecule and empower the tree. That's why trees are spread out and their leaves are spread out that way. That's the point. So the chemicals cause a structure, but the structure changes the probability of certain chemical events. It constrains, it increases the chance that a photon will hit a chlorophyll. So the structure changes the probability of the microchemical events. The microchemical events cause the structure. Now, let me show you how that works in you. You have a bunch of, microchemical reactions going on in you, and they're making this structure. That structure creates an environment that changes the probability of chemical interactions. So your body, the chemicals cause a structure, your environment. It creates an internal environment that changes the probability of those chemical reactions happening. And that's how right? The chemical reactions cause the structure, and then the structure constrains the probability of the chemical reactions. When the probability of events inside and outside your body are the same, do you know what state that is? That's death. That's what death is, right? And so what's happening is you've got bottom-up causation of a structure and then top-down constraint. And when they are properly aligned, you can get the life of a tree, or that you can get the life of Jorge, you can get the life of John, right? Now, once you see that, what you have to see is, and this is what the later, especially the Christian Neoplatonists, especially Erigenes, saw. It's not really right to think that there's sort of an emanation here and emergence there, and right. It's more, and the Neoplatonists had this. There's the procession and the return, but Erigenes said no, it's completely emanation all the way down and emergence all the way up. They're completely interpenetrating each other. So it's not the poles, it's the polarity that is the reality. And I think that is very much a view of reality that we are moving towards. It's very much the view we need in order to explain living things and therefore mental things.
Yeah, I think this interpenetration concept is super, super important. Yeah.
And then here's another Neoplatonic argument. Independently of all of this, we're getting all of this evidence. That's how your mind works. Your mind goes bottom up from sensory data, top down from your most abstract concepts, and it's completely like this, completely interpenetrating, bottom up and top down. And I can give more technical explanation of that. You can see it in some of the other videos or papers I published. And then you can ask yourself this question: why is our mind organized like this? And it's like, well, there's two explanations. Maybe reality is actually organized like that, and we have independent evidence. And then you've got a conformity theory. It says underneath all of our beliefs, right, there's a deeper kind of connectedness, the grammar of cognition, the principles by which it operates, this top down, bottom up, emanation, emergence. And reality shares the same grammar, top down, bottom up. So intelligibility and intelligence share the same grammar, and that's how they can fit together. That's an argument I've also made.
Yeah. So I heard you say actually something like this. It was like, we need an ontology in which there is real emergence, real emanation, and a real relationship between emanation and emergence, right?
Yeah.
And these emergence and emanation are completely interpenetrating, and all the way up, all the way down. So transcendence, immanence.
Yes.
Basically, we have to avoid this kind of dualistic polarization. And you said, I have this written down here, is like in favor of the polarity itself being the real. So it's a field rather than a thing, an ontological field, something like that, right?
Yes, exactly. And I find that this way of talking is deeply resonant with the Neoplatonic traditions. And what's interesting is you can find this resonance within Neoplatonic Christianity, which had a huge impact on Thomas Aquinas in the West and on Maximus in Eastern Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And so the claim that this has been deeply woven into the Christian faith, I think it's fair to say, to some degree, significantly forgotten for many people because of the Reformation and the scientific revolution. And there's been all this emphasis on this other stuff. And I'm saying, I understand there were historical reasons, but I think though we're now at a time where we need to recover this. But you can also see this Neoplatonic framework within Sufism, within Islam. You can see it within Judaism, Kabbalah, right? And there's something going on here for me. Now, I'm not a Christian, and so you may not totally agree, but for me, seeing how this Neoplatonic framework can enter into this marriage, right, this reciprocal reconstruction with Christianity or with Islam or with Judaism, and I think also potentially with like Vedanta and Taoism and Zen, and that's a project I'm working on, like the people in the Kyoto School did. That says something really, really fundamental is going on for me within this Neoplatonic framework. Where you get this capacity, and so I want to really understand it. I want to really get how. Well, think about it. If that emanation and emergence and the relationship between them are real, and it's a polarity of the field, and that is the case within and without, we have a fundamental basis for rationally believing and committing ourselves to being in conformity with the depths of reality in a way that brings about real self-transcendence for human beings. And that would be a profound response to the meaning crisis. That would be a profound kind of connectedness.
Yes. So as a Catholic Christian, to me, what you're saying makes perfect sense. But I have to say, from my experience, I am at the margins of Christianity.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And maybe other religions can say the same. You were talking about Muslims and Sufis. Maybe this kind of framework is also in their margins because, we've been also in religion losing touch with the relationship between transcendence and immanence, between all these.
Well, we've polarized it. Right?
Yes,
To put it in a word, we put transcendence is up there and immanence is down here, and then there are two worlds, and then we wonder, right? And this is not the sole cause by any means; that would be ridiculous. But it is an influencing cause. We wonder why we are driven into polarities. We do the same thing within ourselves. There's mind and body, and they're separate, and we have all these dualisms, right? And they're all reverberating, and they're all disconnecting in profound ways. they disconnect us. Like in Descartes, the person who proposes this kind of dualism, mind and body have no connection. In fact, it's mysterious how they could even causally interact. You face analogous problems when you have a dualistic worldview, where the two worlds, the transcendent world and the immanent world, there's no proper continuity between them and how they could possibly interact. And of course, I take it that Christianity is committed because of the incarnation and the genuine embodiment of Jesus. It wasn't an illusion, and that he is resurrected in body. Thomas touches him, right? That Christianity is ultimately committed to a worldview that does not support those kinds of dualisms. Even though I think in a lot of popular versions of Christianity, it has become very dualistic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can see that, but well, I don't agree with it. Simply, for me, it's like when you talk about this conformity theory, right? The fundamental principles of knowing and the fundamental principles of being of reality have to be the same, or you couldn't get an interweaving, right? So cognition is simultaneously bottom up, top down. So this kind of connection is the way that I understand also my Christianity. But
The religio.
yeah, the religious, exactly.
So I can now circle back a bit, and like that conformity knowing, that's at base what the participatory knowing is. Like the structure of yourself and the structure of the self of the thing, right? It's structural, functional. They come into conformity in a profound way. They share the same grammar. They can touch each other and disclose each other in a kind of reciprocal opening. And that's the thing, right? Like if you're getting this real self-transcendence, think about it even with, like, we could even put it in sort of mundane. You and somebody that you are you really like, and you open up to them such that you allow them to transform you a little. You don't just state facts. You make, as we say, you make yourself psychologically vulnerable. You allow yourself to be transformed, right? And then if you if they see that you're doing that you're opening yourself up, and they reciprocate by allowing themselves to be opened up so that they conform to you, and you get in this process where you are doing this mutually accelerating disclosure, mutually accelerating, transforming, conforming to each other. And that opens the other person up and opens you up. That's love. That's actually what love is psychologically. It's that process of reciprocal opening. The opposite, when we reciprocally narrow. So I refuse to transform, and I refuse to let the world disclose new possibilities to me. And the two narrow each other down. Well, that's addiction. That's the exact opposite. That reciprocal narrowing. I agree with Mark Lewis that that's fundamentally what addiction is. And Plato says, well, no, but you can do the opposite. You can reciprocally open up. You can really transcend, and you can really have the world open up to you. You can fall in love with reality, and that is, he calls that anagoge, the ascent. That is how to be how to have the most meaningful, most happy life.
I think this is for now, because we'll talk more, I hope.
Yeah.
I think this is the perfect closing to this conversation, because it's like, okay, we were talking about the meaning crisis. We are talking about how to connect fully with reality. And in the end, we are going into a very, very religious concept as well, which is love. God is love.
Yes. And I think this is a profound, I mean, I think the pronouncement of God as agape, and the explication of agape as the kind of love that brings you into this this reciprocal opening. I think these are profound truths within the Christian tradition that I think should be given a lot of attention.
I completely agree. Well, John, again, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know many people are going to be like blown away by many of the things that you said here, because it will be the first time they get in touch with these concepts. And I hope this helps them, well, start diving deeper into your work. This is your house. My channel is yours. The doors are open for you. You can come back anytime you want, and I hope that that happens very soon.
Oh yes, yeah. I definitely want to come back. I want to continue to get into this dialogical process with you. I want to apologize if I got a little too technical or abstract, and I assure you, I hope I don't want to be presumptuous. I want to be accessible, but on the other hand, I'm trying to propose arguments that are challenging and getting us to really fundamentally reconsider, open up potential new insights. So getting that sweet spot where it's enough to provoke, but not enough to leave behind or be obscure. I want to say that I'm trying my best to get to that place, and with your help, hopefully, in other conversations, I can hone in even better. I do ask for people to consider some of the other videos, etc., if they want to dig into my work a little bit more.
I'll leave some links to your work in the description below so they can access. I understand that some of the viewers, maybe they don't speak English, so it will be difficult to them to understand, but maybe that's a project for you and your foundation to translate your work so it can be more accessible to the Spanish-speaking community.
We are seriously discussing how we could responsibly start to translate, perhaps starting with Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, so it's subtitled in Spanish. Yeah.
Yes.
That is very much something we are undertaking to do. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you very much, John. Sending you a big hug and see you very, very soon.
Yes. See you very, very soon. Take good care. I enjoyed this a lot.
Me too.